Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land, and welcome to DC Fans United. So, today I thought I would talk about something a little bit different, basically just because it's something I'm interested in myself. So, I used to play Magic a lot, quite a while ago. I think the last time I really played was like 10th edition. So I know I'm quite behind. Like I don't have planeswalkers. I just found out there's something called mythic rares, and a lot of stuff has changed since I used to play. With that being said, I went through my cards last night, and I really don't have that many anymore. I used to have like a long box, a short box, and binders and all that. But now I only have a few cards, but it was enough to put together 4 decks. So I'm going to show them to you guys, and keep in mind they aren't anything special. Like I don't have most of my cards anymore. I used to have like dual lands and tap lands and all that, and I sold all of that long ago. So we're going to be running off of the basic lands, mountains and plains in this case. So let me know of the 4 decks if you make it through this video. You're going to have to be interested in Magic, but of the 4, let me know which you find to be the most interesting. So I had to work with fairly limited options and just kind of had to pick the best cards I could and try and make decks with that. So this is a white-red rush deck, which is a pretty basic deck that you would definitely see a lot back in the olden days. Sometimes mono red, but I try to not use mono decks too much just because they're inherently weak in my opinion. Although I do have a monocolor deck, so we'll have to see about that. So the way I've got it, of course, this is the mana curve. This is the creatures on the bottom, spells on the top, and planes. This is just the way I always lay out decks, so it's easy for me to look at and decide if they're going to play well. In general, and this is very much in general, you want more spells that cost less so you can play things early in the game, and then fewer expensive spells, because if it costs 5 mana and you draw it in turn 1, what are you going to do, right? But that's a very general rule. Okay, so we'll start with the creatures. So basically I just got a bunch of little guys. I might need more 1-mana creatures, I don't know. But Javelineers, 1/1 for 1, you can tap and he throws a javelin that deals 1 damage. So that's pretty cool. Let's see. Mog Fanatic, same thing, but you can sacrifice him to deal 1 damage. This is Svan Alliance. Just 1 mana, 2/1. So that's, 2/1 for 1. It's pretty good. And Suntail Hawk. Suntail Hawk's always been one of my favorite creatures. Look at that little guy. I don't know if you ever noticed he has 4 legs and pointy ears. Love that guy. This has been a fairly solid part of my decks for the longest time. I used to have a deck that only used flying creatures. So anyways, just good little creatures. And then I've got stuff like Brute Force, so the Suntail Hawk can suddenly become a 4/4 until end of turn, and we can trade it with the Serra Angel or whatever. So those are the 1/1 creatures. And then we've got some cool 2-mana creatures. This guy's got Double Strike, so he costs 2 mana and he's 2/1 with Double Strike. But again, if you Brute Force him, he then would become, instead of a 1/2, he'd become a 4/5, and then he's got Double Strike, so it would deal that 4 damage twice before the other creature deals its damage. So this guy could kill something with 8 toughness without dying in that scenario. And then these guys are all 2/1s for 2 mana, and they fly, so pretty good. And then this guy's got protection from... Oh no, he can block flying creatures, and he has First Strike, and he's a 2/2 for 2. So you get the idea. Just good, inexpensive creatures. Now these guys are pretty cool. This guy in particular, I would run more on him if I had him, but he has Shadow, so he can only be blocked by other creatures with Shadow, and which is basically like nobody. So he's basically unblockable. And whenever he attacks, all other creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. And it doesn't say deal damage or anything like that. All he has to do is attack. This guy, these two, same guy, have Shadow also, but when they deal damage to player, you can destroy that player's enchantment. So that's pretty cool. In particular, since I have an enchantment deck, which I'll show you here in a bit. and these decks are going to be playing against each other. This video is going to take forever, I'm sorry. So these guys are all cool. They're 3 mana, they're 2/2s with flying and haste, so really good in a rush deck. And then another guy that's unblockable. Just some kind of heavies. I got the Serra Angels, I got a Blinding Angel, which is really kind of a unique character. Not necessarily the best for this deck, but if you do manage to deal damage to the other player, that player has to skip their next turn. So that's potentially a GG if you get it in. And then just some kind of mid-weight guys that have like fire breathing and stuff. And then this lady is actually a legendary, or no, yeah, she is Barbarian Legend. So she has first strike and haste, and can tap to deal 1 damage to creature or player. The only thing that's dangerous is she only has 1 toughness, so she can get sniped by a Javelineer or something along those lines pretty easily. So then the rest of my spells are, like Glorious Anthem, Humbles for creature control, and then damage, Disintegrate and stuff like that. So I don't know if it's tough enough, but that's what I got. So let me know at the end which deck you like the best, and let's take a look at the next one. Alrighty, so I mentioned I had an enchantment deck as well. So that's what this is. This is a white-green enchantment deck. So this is probably the one I've had the longest, and has gone through many incarnations. At one time it was actually extremely good, at least I thought it was. It was pretty strong. That's when I had Birds of Paradise, and Rancor, and Land Tax, and all kinds of good things. So, Savannas. So essentially this is a shadow of its former self. But the idea then and now was for the deck to run off of enchantments, which powered these 2 creatures in particular. So the first one is this Enchantress. Her deal is she gets +1/+1 for every enchantment in play. So as you can understand, that would make her very strong potentially. You're playing things like Land Tax, that's a 1 mana enchantment. Then you Rancor her, that's another 1 mana enchantment. And she's just getting stronger and stronger. So, aside from her, we have this other Enchantress. Whenever you play an enchantment spell, you may draw a card. So, with 4 of those and lots of 1 mana enchantments, I was able to very quickly run my deck. Draw power is very important in this game, I think. So, I'm missing a lot of the enchantments that used to run the deck. Instead, I have solid enchantments, but not quite the same. So there's Armadillo Cloak, which is just a buff. It gives them +2/+2, trample and life link, but that costs you 3 mana. Glorious Anthems and things like that. So I feel like it's still a pretty solid deck, but for me it's kind of hard because it's not the same as it used to be. Particularly Rancor, because whenever that enchantment was destroyed, it would return to your hand, so you just play it over and over and over and over, and every time you gain cards, and there was even ways to bounce it. So like this card, Treetop Village, is a land, but you can turn it into a creature for a turn. So I'd turn it into a creature, enchant it with Rancor, it would turn back into a land, Rancor would return to my hand, and then I'd just do that over and over. So things like that tend to be really strong decks when they have some kind of a mechanic that you can continually use. So where in this case it's just like you play your card and that's it. It's been played. So this is just trying to still use that same mechanic, but it's just not going to work as well. So hopefully it'll still work okay. I've got some good creatures to enchant. Some old Serra Angels, Commander Isha, who has flying and protection from creatures. Voice of All, so when she comes into play you can choose a color. So she'll have protection from that color. So that can be really good. Say I'm playing against that red-white deck. I come into play and say protection from red. She can't be lightning bolted. So that's potentially really good. And then you toss Armadillo Cloak on her and, Glorious Anthem and all that. So that's pretty much it. I mean, it's just enchantments with some enchantment-driven creatures, a little draw power, like I have Harmonize, draw 3 cards for 4 mana. A tiny bit of creature control. I mean, I have Humble. I don't have Swords to Plowshares anymore. I've got Ace on Lance. but Sunlance is only so good. I got a lifelink because it's a 1-mana enchantment. But yeah, I don't know. It's a good deck, but it's a shadow of its former self. Like, this deck used to be so strong. I would love to take out a ton of these cards and put in different ones. Like, Javelineer doesn't really belong in this deck. I might move those two over to that Rush deck. So I still like this deck. I think it's a solid deck, but it's not quite what it used to be. So I would really like to rebuild this someday. I mean, you play a Birds of Paradise for one, and then you rancor it, and you draw a card, and you tap your Birds of Paradise, and it makes mana, and you know, it's just like very powerful, but you got to work with what you got. So these decks are mostly going to be playing against each other anyway, so we'll see what we can do. So the next one, and the next most interesting, I think, is a blue-black deck. Okay, so next up we have something very different. We have a blue-black control deck. So, a lot of these cards are going to be spells, and then we've got our creatures down here. One cool thing about this is, unlike all of my others, this deck actually has a non-basic land, right? That's awesome. So, the deal with that is, it's a Drowned Catacomb. So, the deal is it comes into play tapped, unless you already control a swamp or an island, which hopefully you already do in a blue-black deck. So, worst comes to worst, it's your first land, so you play it tapped and then it's untapped. But if you have a deal, an island or a swamp, it comes into play untapped, in which case it's a dual land. It would make a blue or black mana, it's up to you. So this is a really good card, and it might be the best card I actually still have, so I'm pretty happy about that. And actually, it's what this deck sort of became into existence for, because originally my blue cards were in a green deck. I had a blue-green deck, and then I found this card and was like, okay, I'll make a blue-black deck. So, at worst, it's a tap land. At best, it's a dual land. So, kind of happy about that. It's like my one like admittedly good card. Like any blue-black deck would have this, no matter how good, if they spent $1,000 on it, they would still have this, because after their dual lands and their tap lands, they would have this. So I think this is better than a tap land, actually. Anyway, I'm on a tangent. The deal is, this is hopefully control. So we've got my one counter spell. It's kind of pitiful, I only have one, but I have a couple Dash Hopes, which is the black counter spell. A bunch of Dark Banishings, because it's a good card. And the only other creatures, the only other decks I'm playing, because I just have these 4 decks, they don't have black creatures. So, this is destroy target non-black creature, it can't be regenerated. So that's pretty good for burying enemies. And then I have a Split Second, which is a similar thing. Basically, a creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn. So if it's a 4/4 or smaller, it dies. But the main way this deck does control, aside from Ovenize, which is like Humble, and those other creature control spells. Oh, we got a cat. Is she gonna come into the frame? Not quite. So we got creature control, a little counter spell, but the main thing is hand control. So we have this card, which is really mean. Hymn to Torak. Target player discards 2 cards at random from his or her hand. If target player does not have enough cards, they discard their whole hand. So, what happens there is, you play that card, your opponent folds up their hand, however many cards it is, and you get to pick those cards from them. So, say they have 7 cards, you get to pick 2. You can't see them, but they hold them, and you get to pick 2, and they have to discard them. That's really powerful, and it's only 2 mana, so you can do that at any point. The fun thing to do is wait until they only have 2 cards and play it, and then it's like, they've probably been saving those 2 for something as well. So, basically a couple other discard cards, like Wrench Mind, this one. Sorry about the glare. Working with one hand here. So, Wrench Mind's similar, but the person discards 2 cards from their hand, unless they discard an artifact, and they get to choose. So, it's not quite as powerful, but still pretty powerful. So, basically, control, a little draw power and stuff in that end. And then over here, my creatures, and this is kind of where it gets a little weaker. I think anyway. Especially 1 mana. I just have blood pets, so 1/1 for 1. You can sacrifice it for 1 black mana. It's not really anything special. I have a Will-O-the-Wisp, which is a rare for some reason. It's an exceptionally good blocker, though. It can fly, it can regenerate, and it only costs 1 mana. So you can block Serra Angel all day with it, but it's not going to do any damage. So then I have some stuff to help, like search your deck. Sage Owl enters the battlefield. You can rearrange the top 4 cards of your deck. I think that's a really good card. And he also flies. These guys are cool because they have Shadow, so basically they can't be blocked. So the idea is you control their deck, and then you just kind of whittle them down. And this guy helps with that because he can tap to destroy target creature. Very strong for 3 mana. Problem is he's a 1/1, so he's easy to kill, but if they can't do direct damage, you can sit there and waste their creatures all day, which lets you get out your, what I like to think of as my heavies, particularly Visara the Destroyer. She has the same ability. She can tap to destroy, and she's flying with 5/5. Sindra Vampire, basically the Black Serra Angel. Well, not really, but, they always match each other. And, yeah, some stuff like that. So, blue-black control with a little creature damage. Is it going to be strong enough? What do you guys think? In some ways, I think it's the most interesting of the decks. I just know there's so many more cards out there that can make these decks a lot stronger. Not even talking about modern cards, because I don't know any of those. But even, back in the day, there were so many better cards than what I have here. So, it's just for fun. Let me know what you think. We'll be checking out the final deck. Alright, so last and probably least is the mono green deck. So by the time I got to the end of the cards I had left, I didn't have enough really to do another dual color deck. So we got mono green. Although I suppose I could try and figure out just doing 3 decks and making 1 3 colors. But in any case, we've got a real basic mono green deck. I got your creatures. Got some creatures. Got a few spells, not many to be honest. A couple giant growths, Seal of Strength, which is the same essentially, except it's an enchantment. It's sad I don't have a full roster of giant growths, so I probably would have used those. Naturalize, it's always good. Destroy target, enchantment or artifact. Let's see, Revive, you can return any card from your graveyard to your hand. Also not ideal, but this deck, I didn't really have enough cards to even fill it out, so I kind of had to use what I had. A couple Gaia's Anthem, those are the same as Glorious Anthem. Let's see, so we got some creatures. Went with the Llanowar Elves, got your 4 Llanowar Elves, some Scrib Sprites. These are like Suntail Hawk, 1/1 for 1 that flies. And Essence Warden's cool. When a creature comes into play, you gain 1 life. And then these little guys, they're kind of interesting because they have flying and haste, and they're a 2/1 for 1 green. So the drawback is they have Echo 3. So at the beginning of your upkeep, if you don't pay 3 mana for them, they die. So you basically get it for 1 turn unless you pay 3 green to keep it. So it's interesting because you can deal 2 damage for 1 green no matter what. And it's kind of a good card, especially because you could giant growth it or whatever else. It's decent anyway. But again, there's not too many really exciting cards. I've got a lot of just like mana production. In addition to the Llanowar Elves, we have Quirion Elves, which do the same thing, but they could make any color you want. But since it's monocolor, it's kind of redundant. They'd only need to make green. I've just got some solid creatures, like this guy's 3 green for a 4/5. Nothing special, but he's a big guy. And some trolls. You got trolls. I got this one that's a weird creature. It's 5 mana. It's only a 3/4, but it can't be countered, and it has protection from blue, so that's moderately helpful. Then I have these guys, Thresher Beasts. It's 4/4 for 5, and if it gets through and deals damage, you get to destroy one of their lands. So normally you'd put that in like a red-green land destruction deck, but I just got to use what I got. Cockatrice is kind of cool too. It's come on, focus. It's a flying 2/4, and at the end of combat, all creatures that blocked it are destroyed. So whether it kills something or not, if it is blocked by this, it's destroyed. So it can be kind of cool. Not that super exciting of a deck, really. Just kind of a real basic green foresty deck, but something to play, right? And kind of fill it out. I didn't think 3 decks was going to be enough, really. So with 4, I get another person to play. That's pretty decent, I think. You can have a good little game there. Oh, this is the one card that's actually pretty funny, though. So check it out. Might of Oaks. Target creature gets +7/+7 until end of turn. But he says, guess where I'm going to plant this? He looks all crazy. He's running with a whole tree. So the implication, yeah. But you get +7/+7. It does cost you 4 mana, but it's an instant. So say you attack with a Scrib Sprite that flies, so it doesn't get blocked. And then you're like, oh, I'll make it into a 8/8. Potentially kill the player. So the deck can win on a blue moon, but it's probably the weakest of the 4. So that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Comment below. Let me know what you think. Which of the 4 decks would you play? And that's all for now. Thanks for watching. I know this one was totally different from normal, but it was just something I found to be interesting. And I might get back into this. If I start to get cards again, I'll probably make more videos. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. Be sure to hit the bell for notifications. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't. And as always, thank you for watching and being a part of DC Fans United.